For those of you who don't know me, let me take a minute to introduce myself. My name is Mengus Maps. I'm one of your commissioners on Portland City Council. I'm the commissioner in charge of the Bureau of Emergency Communications, which is basically 911. I'm also the commissioner in charge of the Bureau of Environmental Services, which you probably think of as being the sewer bureau, but we do a whole lot more than that. We're also keenly dedicated to protecting our rivers and streams. And finally, I am the commissioner in charge of the Water Bureau, which is the topic that brings us together tonight. Tonight, I mostly want to hear your questions and concerns about issues related to water. But before we get into that dialogue, I wanted to take a moment to share some of my goals for the Water Bureau for this coming year. As of today, I've been in this job for 1 year, 1 month, and 9 days. And as I head into my second year at the Water Bureau, here are some of the priorities I'm focused on. First, our mission at the Bureau is to deliver excellent water every minute of the day. Second, despite rising inflation, I'm also committed to keeping your utility rates flat. Third, I know many people are still struggling financially, especially in the wake of COVID. That's why I want to increase participation in our low-income water and sewer rate reduction program. My goal is to see at least 75% of eligible families receive utility assistance. I'm also committed to improving customer service over at the Water Bureau. And in a sad sign of the times, the Bureau must also do a better job of managing homeless camps on the lands owned by the Water Bureau. Other goals I'm focused on for this year, I want the Bureau to do a better job of issuing water permits in a timely fashion. In addition, the federal government has directed the Bureau to build a new water filtration plant, and I'm committed to fulfilling that mandate on time and on budget. Finally, I want to address the public's concerns about lead in their home plumbing. And now I have the great honor of introducing the director of the Water Bureau, Gabe Salmner, who will introduce some of her staff members and other special guests who have joined us tonight. Director Salmner, welcome.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, and good evening, everyone. I am Portland Water Bureau Director Gabe Salmer. I use she, her pronouns. And I just want to echo Yvette and the Commissioner's thanks to everyone who made time this evening to learn more about this important topic. We're really excited to have you here. I also wanted to thank and acknowledge our regulatory partners who have joined us. And just a reminder that they're here to listen just like you are. The Commissioner has designed tonight's town hall to allow a dialogue and a listening session for the city. So he and I and the Water Bureau staff will be fielding any questions. But to start us off, as Yvette mentioned, I've asked Water Quality Information Coordinator Scott Bradway to review a few slides, just a brief presentation, to give everyone a good foundation for our discussion tonight. And as Yvette mentioned, if you'll please hold your questions and comments until the end of the presentation, then Yvette will be able to better moderate that discussion. So I just want to thank everyone again for being here. I also see some new and some old faces and friends, so I appreciate people making the time to be here. And Scott, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Gabe. Great. Good evening, everybody. Just going to try to roll through this quick presentation here on just an overview on lead in drinking water here in Portland. So just quick overview of our drinking water system. So Portland Water Bureau, we have two drinking water sources. We have the Bull Run watershed, our primary drinking water source, and our secondary source, the Columbia South Shore well field. The Bull Run watershed is our primary source. It's what we get our water from, over 90% of the time. It is a naturally corrosive, unfiltered surface water source. We currently treat the Bull Run with chlorine as our primary disinfectant. We add ammonia to form chloramine so that that disinfection lasts as it moves through the distribution system. And we also adjust the pH as our corrosion treatment currently. So what are the sources of lead as we know it here in Portland? So Portland, we're and many cities here on the West Coast are fortunate in that lead service lines were just never historically used here. That's in contrast to other cities and places that we hear about frequently in the news, such as Flint, Newark, Benton Harbor, Washington, D.C., and Pittsburgh, and the like. We did, however, use these short 2 to 3 foot pipes that are sometimes called pigtails, goosenecks. They're service connectors. And if you look at the diagram there on the screen, or the street cutout, the service connector is that short little gray pipe that connects the main pipe in the street, the mains, to your service line, which is that blue pipe that runs to the home. In 1985, the Oregon Health Authority, state of Oregon, passed a lead ban, and that required drinking water systems to identify and remove all lead pipes from the system. So we completed that process of removing all the known pigtails from our system in 1998. So what we're really left with for the main sources of lead in drinking water in our system today are premise plumbing, and that is generally copper pipes that are joined with lead solder. That is most often found in homes that are built between 1970 and 1985. And when you look at the entire collection of homes in our system, that is really about less than 10% of all the homes here in Portland. But you can also find still elevated lead from older fixtures in homes outside of that time range. It was in 85 is when the level of lead in brass was reduced to reduce lead in water. So these older fixtures can also contribute to elevated levels of lead. So in the mid 90s, or 1992 actually, the EPA passed or enacted the lead and copper rule. And that required large systems to install corrosion control treatment to make the water less corrosive to lead and copper throughout the system, particularly in service lines and premise plumbing. At the time, the city's current treatment facilities were not able to be able to treat water, fully treat the Bull Run water to meet the requirements of the lead and copper rule. So City Council directed the Portland Water Bureau to look at an alternative compliance approach to the lead and copper rule, as opposed to building additional treatment at that time. The result was a 4-part program that was approved by the state of Oregon in 1997. It includes water treatment and monitoring. So we do treat our water for corrosion. It's just not the full treatment. We also monitor at a select pool of homes every 6 months. In addition, we provide education and outreach to all of our customers. We also provide free testing to any customer that requests it. It's one of the best ways to find out if you have lead at your tap is to test the water for it. And while I won't go into these portions tonight, we also have 2 aspects of our program that focus on other sources of lead throughout the community. This program was kind of designed to be a holistic approach to exposure to all sources of lead. So we provide grants to community organizations to do education and outreach for all sources of lead, and those grants are then used by the Housing Bureau for a HUD grant to do lead paint removal for low-income homes. So here you can see kind of the history of our regulatory testing for the lead and copper rule. The yellow bars on the left show what the untreated Bull Run water was like. So we saw lead levels at these homes up in 40, 50 parts per billion. Once we installed treatment in 1998, we saw a significant decrease of those levels of lead in these homes. However, as you can see, we are frequently or occasionally above and below the action level, kind of hovering around this action level. The action level, however, is it's kind of a regulatory term. It is the level that a system that has full corrosion control treatment would be expected to be below. It's not a health-based standard. As we know today, there are no safe levels of exposure to lead from any sources, including drinking water. So in 2013, we exceeded the action level for the first time in just about 7 years. And at that point, we realized that we needed to do more to reduce our levels of lead in drinking water. So we undertook a study to look at what, if anything, we could do with our existing treatment facilities or system operations to further reduce the levels of lead. And what the outcome of that study was is that really we were doing the best we could with what we had, and that if we wanted to further reduce levels of lead at customer taps, we really needed to go for additional treatment. So in 2017, we agreed to install or begin the improved corrosion control treatment project that will improve our treatment and hopefully further reduce levels of lead. Next slide. Oh, actually, 1 second on this one. So one thing to keep in mind about these results is that they are taken from a very specific type of home in our system. These are homes that by law are required to have been built between 1983 and 1985, where Water Bureau staff have gone out to these homes and inspected the plumbing and confirmed that they have lead solder with copper pipes in them. The results that you're seeing here are not necessarily representative of our entire system. The goal of testing at these homes is that you want to test at the worst case scenario locations to see how effective your treatment is. However, if we look at kind of our system as a whole on the next slide. So this shows results from our free customer testing program that we offer. What we did on this graph is we took all the results for a 5-year period from 2017 to 2021, and we broke those results all up by the year that the home they were collected from was built. And then we took the median result of all of those years. So what this shows is that for the majority of years of year of home built for homes and buildings in our system, the lead in water level is below 1 parts per billion. And it really shows how that age range, the 70 to 85 area, is where you really see the sources of lead coming from. That's where we generally see the higher levels of lead in drinking water. It's not to say that we don't ever see elevated levels of lead in water from some of the other years, but that's kind of why we kind of focus on that age range. So how do we focus on that? So we do a lot of education and outreach to our customers because we want to let them know that lead in water is a possibility. We do outreach to explain to our customers how they can reduce their exposure. There are several steps, simple steps customers can take to reduce their exposure to lead in water. The easiest one is just to flush your tap in the morning when you come home from work or school before drinking it. That can reduce the levels of lead in water by up to 90%. We also like to educate them who's most at risk. Children under 6, pregnant people are most impacted by exposure to lead. And we encourage everyone to request a free lead and water test kit. We also try to target this outreach to those who are most at risk. We send a multilingual brochure to homes that are built in that high risk time frame, that's 1970 to 85, that have children and pregnant people, as well as all the homes built in that time frame. We've also begun targeting multifamily units. A lot of our traditional outreach has been through our bills, and we recognize that many multifamily units don't receive a bill. They don't pay a water bill, so they're not seeing the information we traditionally send to our customers. And they also have a lot less control over their home plumbing. So encouraging them to test so they can take simple steps is really important. And also, as a result of our recent exceedance, we are including an educational lead brochure and a message on all of our bills to all of our bill paying customers. We're sending mailings to all child cares in the region, as well as medical providers and other service providers that work with pregnant people and young children. We're running advertisements on news and social media. And we also include information in the annual water quality report that is delivered to all the homes in Portland. So as I mentioned, our corrosion control study that we did started back in 2013 identified improved corrosion control as really our best tool that we have for reducing levels of lead in Portland. So that project is on schedule and on track to be online by the end of April of this year. So just a few months away. This will be online. Next. So what this improved treatment will do, it will add to what we're currently doing. So we are currently adjusting our pH to 8.3. That's about as far as we can get with our current facilities because we can adjust what's called the alkalinity, and that's the mineral content in our drinking water. By increasing the alkalinity, that will make the pH more stable as it moves through our system. So what we'll be doing is we'll be increasing the alkalinity to 25 milligrams per liter. And then we'll increase the pH to a level where we hope to see 8.5 out of customer taps. Currently, without the alkalinity, that our adjustment of 8.3 ends up being around 7.5 to 7.8, maybe up to 8 when it gets out into the distribution system. So our goal is to get it up to 8.5 by being able to, with that alkalinity adjustment. Next. We'll be doing that by adding sodium carbonate and carbon dioxide are the two substances we'll be using in our improved corrosion control treatment. These are naturally occurring substances. They're used frequently in the food and beverage industry. Pretty simple, basic substances for this. Yes. And in the meantime, we're taking on short-term measures to also protect public health. We recently increased our pH from 8.2 to 8.3. That was just about a month ago. We are also looking to accelerate how we bring the improved corrosion control treatment project online. The original plan was we would initially increase the alkalinity, let it sit for a few months, let it stabilize in the system. When bringing on new treatment, you don't want to just turn it all on right away. That can kind of disrupt the system and the water quality in it. You want to be cautious and careful with the drinking water system. So originally our steps were going to be 3 different steps, about 3 months each. But we believe we can do it in about 1 month each. We've put out and developed a bunch of monitoring programs throughout the distribution system so that we'll be able to monitor how these different steps are impacting the distribution system and the water quality throughout, so we can make sure we're still being cautious and protective of our drinking water quality, but also get this corrosion control treatment online, hopefully up to about 6 months sooner than what had originally been planned. We're also begun providing filters to customers that are most at risk to lead in drinking water. And we're doing increased education outreach to those most at risk as well. I'll just end it there.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Scott. Yvette, what do we do now?
All right, so now we're going to move into questions. So it was a pretty brief presentation. Hang on, I need to mute.
I think that might be Robin.
Yeah, we need to find him and mute him. Michelle could help me out here.
Page 1.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Yes, if you're not speaking, please keep yourself on mute so we can actually hear who is talking. Does anybody have any questions? If you have questions, please use the reaction button on the bottom of the Zoom taskbar that has a raise hand option. I'll raise mine to see, you can see what that looks like. If you don't want to ask your question verbally, please feel free to enter it in the chat.
And I'll just take this moment to introduce Yona Akagi, who's our water quality manager, who can also answer some questions. You can see her there. And again, Scott Bradway in our water quality information, who can also help out with any questions.
Great. And I think I see a question in the chat, which I had too, and maybe we can direct this to Scott. I think
Sure.
Karen asked, it appears in the chart that lead levels were higher in the spring. Is that a fluke or a systemic issue?
No, great observation. No, it unfortunately is not a fluke. What happens in the difference between spring and fall is that in the fall, our water is a lot warmer. And when the water gets warmer, warmer water in general can just absorb more material to it. But also as the water gets warmer, there's increased microbial activity in the system. And that also causes the pH kind of to decrease and kind of uses up that treatment as it gets to people's homes. And so that can result in higher levels of lead leaching into the water.
God, if I can just add something to that, I think I'm looking at the chart and I see that on, I don't know if Jamie can pull it up, but the spring and fall, it got moved a little bit. And so I think, Karen, where you're seeing spring, it's actually the fall levels that are higher. I think it's slide number 5, Jamie.
Working on it.
The legend just got a little goofed up. So it's a great observation, and Scott's explanation was correct that they are higher in the fall. But that's why it looked.
I didn't actually fully hear the question. I just went with what I assumed the question was, which is what it normally is why is it higher in the fall? And I just should have listened instead.
I read it in the chat, that's why I could see it. So the dark blue is actually the spring, and then the light blue is actually the fall. And so the levels tend to be higher in the fall than in the springtime.
Interesting. Okay. And while we're waiting for questions to come in, maybe I could pose one to staff. Let's say you're just a regular citizen who's concerned about the possibility of there being lead in your home pipes. What should you do? Is there a number you can call, website, best practices? I don't know if that's for Scott or the director.
Okay, Gabe's looking at me. Sure, yes. So we have a great partnership with Multnomah County Health Department, and they help staff what's called the lead line for us. So we encourage everyone who has concerns about lead in drinking water or any sources of lead for that matter to contact the lead line. That's leadline.org is the website. It's also, the phone number is 988-4000. And by contacting them, they can order a lead and water test kit. There's actually a form on their website at leadline.org where you can order a lead and water test kit. And so that's really the first step, is finding out whether you truly have lead in water at your tap in your home. So you do that by testing your water for lead. In the meantime, while you're waiting for your test result, we definitely encourage you and encourage everyone really, regardless of your levels of lead, to flush your tap before you use it first thing in the morning. It's always good to get some fresh water that's out in the street into your home, instead of drinking water that's been sitting there. I mean, it's just generally cooler and more appeasing and appetizing, in my opinion. So by doing that, that's a great way to reduce the levels of lead in your drinking water. If you have young children, talk to your doctor about getting them tested for lead in water. One thing you should never do is boil your water. That doesn't actually reduce the levels of lead in it. And if you have young children in the home, also don't make baby formula or cook with hot water. Water that sits in your hot water heater, again, because it's hot, it can absorb more metals to it. And so it can be higher, especially if you have lead in your plumbing. As that hot water moves over the lead, it can absorb more of it. So you always want to use cold water when cooking. I know it can be tempting when you've got a screaming child and you need to make some formula, but really the best move is to use that cold water.
Interesting. Thanks, Scott.
Great. Thank you. And it looks like we have a question from Tom Lipton.
Hi, Tom.
Hi, Mingus. Yeah, I had just had a question in your guidance, Scott, that you posted, or the Water Bureau guidance. It talked about letting the tap run for 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And it seems like for the average homeowner, especially those that are in that 10% category, I'm always confused by that. Do I let it go 30 seconds? Do I just let it go 2 minutes? I mean, it's quite a difference in the terms of the volume of water, and trying, in the morning, standing there and waiting 2 minutes, watching the water run. So could you be more definitive or give a reason that a person would be able to understand what they might do in their home, or should they just play it safe and just do 2 minutes? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question, Tom. So yeah, it does vary, and really what that variability is it depends on how long your service line is and how much plumbing is in your house from that tap that you're running to it gets out into the street. Really, the best way to determine or figure that out is to feel that water temperature. When you first turn on the morning, it's gonna be a little warm because it's been sitting inside your house all night. And as you're kind of flushing out that water that's been in your home plumbing, you'll feel that drop in temperature, particularly this time of year. This is a great time to figure out that time period because the water is so cold out in the streets. And so once you feel that drop in temperature, then you're most likely getting water that's coming in from the mains out the street, and that's going to have very low levels of lead in it, if any at all. So that's one of the best ways to figure that out. And if you're concerned about the use of the water, you can wash some dishes first thing in the morning, water your plants. Even just flushing the toilet first in the morning tries to start to move some of that water and can kind of speed up that process.
Okay. Could you adjust the written instructions to reflect what you just said a little bit better? I think it would be helpful, at least from what I recall reading on the slide that you just put up that shows it in very small print. And I've seen it mailed to me. Yeah. So I think if it just a little bit of tweaking on the message would be, excuse me, helpful.
We can definitely look into that. Unfortunately, we do have some regulatory requirements of verbiage that we are required to use in these, but we can definitely look at what kind of play there is in that verbiage. It's a great point.
Well, it seems like you just said it. Just advise people that it's 30 to 2. It may take 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and the idea is that you turn it on and wait for it to get cold, and then you'll know and time it. Time how long it takes to get cold, which you don't say in the guidance that you provide us. It doesn't say that. So the way you just described it is really good. So maybe make a tape of that or something. Anyway, thank you. Thanks again.
Thanks,
Good
Tom.
feedback, Tom.
Thank you for that, Tom. And I did see another question in the chat. Looks like Karen posed it here. So the question is on lead. It seems like a public-private partnership would benefit the 10% of homes, especially at risk, especially multifamily homes where the residents may move around more rather than continual education. Do you have plans to address removal of lead pipes?
Well, we're looking at a wide range of options in order to reduce the amount of, or to address, the situation that folks who find themselves with lead plumbing are facing. As you heard, we have our treatment plant coming online in April. We're really hopeful that that will make a big impact on these homes. If you think back on that slide, you can see how things really changed when we in the past have adjusted the water chemistry. So we're looking to see how that goes. In the meantime, we're also looking at other options in terms of helping folks get these problematic pipes out of their homes. We're engaged with dialogues with the city attorney's office, the Water Bureau, other regulatory agencies to see what our options are. One of the things I've learned in this job is that the process of building a city is never over. It's just a continuous process. So we're always looking for ways to make our system better. And I can tell you that's one of the things that's on the track and under consideration. At the same time, we also have some solutions that are very much in progress, and we should see making a big difference in the lives of some folks before the end of this year.
Also, just to add to that, the commissioners also asked us to look into a notification program so that we can make sure that people are aware when they purchase their home what the situation is. And so we're looking into whether that would take a state law change, whether it's something we can do at the city, but it is important that everyone has that information so that they can make the best decision for their family.
Great. Thank you, Director.
Okay, and there was another question that was answered, but in case people did miss it in the chat, the question was, aren't the free lead tests available for everyone in Portland, not just people who are directly customers to the Portland Water Bureau? And the answer is yes, these lead tests are available to anyone in Portland if you wanted to test your water.
And again, if you are curious about the content of your water, you can go to leadline.org and we'll set you up with a lead testing kit. You can also give them a call at 503-988-4000.
Yes, and we put that phone number as well as a link to the Multnomah County lead poisoning prevention website where you can get more information there as well. So those are both resources that are in the chat. And we have a couple other questions coming in. A lot of these are multiple questions, so we may not get through all of them. I might bounce around so everybody gets a chance. One to start is, why aren't free filters available to anyone who asks?
Maybe I'll hand this one over to the director.
Thanks, Commissioner. And I would I'll give my 2 cents and then ask Scott, who's been working on this program. So one of the things that we know about filters is that they have to be used correctly to be effective. They can be very useful, and where you've seen them deployed, free filters for a whole population in cities that have lead service lines where they've either made a change in treatment or they're removing those lines. And because those affect everyone, in the entire water service area, a filter can make a lot of sense in that case. In our case, we have very specific populations who could best benefit from a filter. And you can notice in all of our materials that we do recommend filters in some situations. That's been in our material, I believe, over the last few decades. So it's something that is useful in certain situations. And Scott, if you want to talk just a little bit more about where filters can be most helpful.
Yeah, right now we're really targeting filters for folks that have lead in drinking water. So anyone that has a lead water result over 10 parts per billion, we are offering to provide them a free lead and water filter. We're also working with some other customers who are part of our voluntary testing programs because they have elevated lead in their drinking water, providing them filters as well. They can use for themselves.
And I think I'm looking at the chat. Is there a place where you can go online to learn more about where to get a filter if you're in that category? If you want to learn more about filters, where do you go?
At this point, we literally just rolled this program out about 3 weeks ago. We have not had a chance to, we haven't put anything on our website about this yet. And because we're targeting it really at people who have elevated levels of result, we call every single person when they have a high result and we talk to them individually. We also mail them the information to them. So the people who we're currently providing those filters for are getting that information sent straight to them, both through phone calls and mailing. So it is out there. It is getting to people who need it, who are offering it to them now.
Sure. And again, to follow up, I think, on a third element of this question, when we talk about homes which are most vulnerable to lead, could you remind us again what bucket those homes fall into?
Yeah, the ones that we feel are most vulnerable, and this is most vulnerable for our system. And I think we have to take this as with somewhat of a grain of salt in that, it's the homes that are built between 70 to 85. But if you remember that chart that we had up there before,
Yeah.
More than half of those homes had lead and water levels below 5 parts per billion. So while those homes are most likely to have high levels of lead and water, it's not likely that every one of those homes has high lead and water. I know it sounds kind of confusing, but point being is like that's where it's most likely to happen, but still not very likely to happen in those homes. So that's why we want to test instead of just doing blanket filters out to everyone, because it's just not needed for the system.
And Scott, let's say I'm a renter and I don't know when my home or apartment was built. How do I find out that information? So if I know if I'm in this kind of relative high risk category.
Yeah, I mean, one of the easiest ways, you can go on Portland Maps website there and look at the assessor information. It tells you what year the home was built. But again, I really think the best way to find out is to test your water for lead. That's really the best thing to do. Because even if your home is built in that period, it doesn't necessarily mean you've got lead solder. When you do have lead solder, as our regulatory testing shows, just over 10% of those homes with lead solder have elevated levels of lead in the drinking water. So that's not even a guarantee either. So really, it's just testing. Testing is really the only way to know for sure if you've got lead in your drinking water.
All right, great, thank you.
Commissioner, I'd also add, I know just another plug for the lead line. These are dedicated professionals who can really walk you through your individual situation. I can't say enough good things about the people who staff that and who can give you that information, as well as ordering a kit. They can really explain to you what your options are. As Tom was saying, they can give you sort of those tips and tricks about how to learn the information. They can walk you through how to find the age of your home. If you're concerned about living in an apartment where you're wanting to understand what your situation is there, they can give you information there. So it's a great place to start.
Thank you.
If I could just add, we offer free lead testing to anyone regardless of the age of your home and send out information about that. We just do additional outreach to folks that are in that kind of more vulnerable age period. So anyone, whether you're a bill paying customer or a renter, we offer that free lead testing and have been sending letters and brochures to all of them offering the testing. So. they don't necessarily need to figure out if they're in that age group. They can just test their home.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on to a question that references a slide that was in the presentation. So this is from Paul in the chat. What was the cost of the Lusted Hill lead mitigation project? The slide indicated that lead mitigation would also be incorporated into the new Bull Run water filtration plant. Does this mean that the current Lusted Hill construction effort was not enough and additional measures are needed? Or will the Lusted Hill project be abandoned when the filtration plant is put online? It's a really good question.
Thank you so much, Paul, for the question. Maybe I'll start with Yona to talk a little bit about how that works. And then I believe we also have some other filtration project folks on who might be able to add to that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gabe. So roughly, and someone else can probably chime in with better numbers, roughly the cost of the Lusted Hill improvements to add additional corrosion control was around $20 million. And corrosion control is going to be incorporated into the new treatment plant. That's because when we build our new treatment plant, which is a filtration plant that's going to come online in 2027, we're going to have one treatment plant. We're going to consolidate all of our treatment in that plant. Right now, we add chlorine up at Headworks, we add ammonia and caustic, which is our current corrosion control treatment at Lusted, and at the new treatment plant, we're going to have all of our treatment there. So it's not that what we're building currently at Lusted, which we call our improved corrosion control treatment project, isn't going to be enough. It's just that when we build the filtration plant, it's going to be incorporated into that plant. So I don't know if that answers the question. I do think once a new treatment plant does come online, the filtration plant, the Lusted facility is going to no longer be used.
Thanks for that update. I'm going to go jump back to another question that was asked earlier by Lauren. If lead has been an issue in Portland for decades, why is it taking so long to address it?
Maybe I'll start by that and then ask Scott or Yona if they want to join in, because they have certainly been working on this issue for a long time, and we're thankful for that. Lead is a persistent problem, and it's something that we take very seriously. As the commissioner said at the top of this meeting, our mission is to provide excellent water every minute of every day, and that's to everyone. And so it's something that we have worked on. I think you can see through Scott's presentation all of the steps that have been done, and the additional measures that we have taken throughout the years to lower levels. There's also been an additional scientific understanding of lead, that there is no safe level of lead. And so that drives our decisions. There's also regulatory improvements and changes that have happened that have driven us to take future or further actions. So we have been working on this issue for many years. I believe that our improved corrosion control treatment facility offers a very strong tool in our toolbox to address lead. I'm also really grateful for the commissioner's commitment on this issue, that he is looking for lots of other tools that we can be able to use to make sure that people have this information and that we can continue to address the issue. And Scott, Yona, anything else that you want to say to sort of the history of our work on this topic?
If I can just add, it is something that we have been working on for years, and I would say it's something that the whole country is kind of still struggling with the challenges of lead in our infrastructure, in our homes. As folks know, that the EPA recently came out with a revised lead and copper rule. It's still an issue across the nation, and it's not just in drinking water. I mean, we've been really fortunate that we've gotten, I think, lead out of some of our systems. Like, lead is no longer allowed in gasoline, so that's been really helpful. But I mean, lead was used in paint for years, and it's still out there. It's still in our homes, and it's still in some of our plumbing. And it just it's going to take a long time to get all the lead out of our environment, or out of our homes.
I also think that this maybe touches on a question I saw about the 20 million that was spent at Lusted. So maybe just to Yvette, if it's okay to tie this into that question, the work is ongoing, and because this is such a persistent and important issue, no, we were not willing to wait for the filtration plant to come online to be able to tackle this issue. And so we will be reusing aspects of the work at Lusted in, and that will be incorporated into the filtration plant. But we didn't want to wait to bring that treatment online, because this is such an important issue.
Thanks, Gabe. And I did want to highlight, just so people are aware and resources are being shared, that if you do talk or call or reach out to the Leadline staff, the staff is bilingual and can speak English and Spanish, and they do have access to interpretation services. So even folks who are not English or Spanish speakers, they can still reach out and call that number and have somebody translate the information for them if that's necessary. So I just want to make sure that comment did not get missed in this thread. And another comment is, Lauren, a citizen is fully responsible to keep their water safe, to test and request a filter. Isn't Water Bureau responsible for delivering water that won't leach from lead pipes? I think we can clarify a couple things there.
Sure, and maybe I'd ask Scott or Yona just to talk about the regulatory structure that we operate under. Maybe tell people a little bit about how the lead and copper rule works and what our responsibilities are under that.
Sure. Yes, I mean, the way that the lead and copper rule works is that we are required to treat our water to reduce the corrosion of lead, which, we have been treating the water, as I think you remember the graph that Scott showed. When we didn't have any treatment before the lead and copper rule came out, our water was much more corrosive. We've been treating it since 1997 with caustic soda, which has pushed up our pH, and we've seen significant reductions in lead, corrosion of lead from our water since we've been treating it. I think this question really gets at, the treatment plant that is coming on in the next couple of months is going to bring us further down that road, and that really is going to, hopefully lower levels even further to where citizens aren't going to have to take as many actions. I do think it's always a good idea to run your water, like Scott mentioned, in the morning. If you have lead solder in your home, but it's just a good idea to run your water to get the freshest water you can into your home. But we're hoping that with this new treatment plant coming online in a couple months, that we are going to be treating the water to where it's going to be leaching significantly less metals into the water. I don't know, Scott, if you have anything to add to that.
Well, maybe I can jump in here. I'm the commissioner of in charge of the Water Bureau. Can't I just order people to replace the pipes in their homes?
Commissioner, I was just about to talk about that. I think that is an interesting fluke of the way that the lead and copper rule was written. It's something that requires us to deliver safe water to the tap. It's something we take very seriously, but we also don't have control over the premise side, the home side of that plumbing. So it makes it very difficult. There are ongoing revisions to the lead and copper rule. We've been paying attention to that, but ultimately the point of the law and the charge to all utilities, which we take very seriously, is to deliver safe water. So unfortunately, even as a commissioner, you can't direct people to or require people to change their plumbing in this case. what you can do is direct the Water Bureau to take proactive measures to address the corrosivity of our water. So that's what we are doing. And also, as I think you've mentioned in public as well, look into whether there are loan programs, whether there are funds available, so that if people are in the situation and need to take that step, that there are funds available so we can help them do that. But it is an interesting predicament that we find ourselves in charge of something that we can't make some of those decisions.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. And I see Tom has his hand up again. Hey, Tom.
Thank you. Yes, I do. And it's about this specific issue. Back in 1987, I went to work for the Bureau of Environmental Services.
Oh.
And at that time, there was a project called the Mid-County Sewer Project. And that was a project that required BES to work with private property owners and provide sewers in the Mid-County area. And the city somehow got authority to make every single property owner change their on-site plumbing to connect into the sewer that was provided by BES. Now, I know this is a different situation, and I'm not saying that there's, there was a mandate. It was a state mandate that BES had to do that. So whatever that was. But I think if the city council wanted to say that they wanted to create a program to actually help address the plumbing on these properties, which I'm estimating by the fact Scott said it was around 10%, and I think we have 170,000 single family residential properties, and so 10% would be about 17,000 plus or minus whatever it might be. But what I'm getting at is that I think there are ways to do things if the city finds that that would be a valuable thing to try and do. And I'm actually looking forward to seeing, okay, let's see how this thing works. And from your answers, I see that, okay, it is $20 million that you're spending that will be a one-time thing. It's going to last for 5 or 6 years, and then we won't need it anymore. Hopefully somebody will figure out some productive use of that site and those facilities, which is your job, Water Bureau. So, but other than that, I think then the next thing is that lead's always going to be there unless it gets taken out. And that to me would be a possible thing to look at and see what the limitations really are, because city council has the ability to do many things if it wants to.
Well, sure, Tom. Thank you for that background, and thank you for your service to the city. And as the commissioner in charge of BES today, I want to thank you for your service to that important bureau too. I think your analysis is right on target. The Water Bureau. There are some issues which are kind of programmatic, which is what the staff of the Water Bureau do. There are other issues which deal with policy, and that is really in my bailiwick. One of the things that I'm doing is taking a look at all the options that we might be able to create in order for me to be the last commissioner who has to have a public forum about lead in people's home piping. I'd really like to put this issue to bed. Right now, we don't have the legal framework for getting there. And frankly, we don't have the financial framework for getting there either. But part of the work that Michelle, who's my staffer here, and I do is to talk with policymakers, talk with the attorneys to see what options that we might have in order to finally put lead to bed.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner. I do want to get to one chat question a while back that went through. So Patricia Neighbor says, I am a resident of outer Northeast Portland. In the works of the Water Bureau, what are inequities that have been identified? What are the plans to reduce those inequities, ensure reductions are sustainable over time, and ensure that public money spent results in the greatest positive impact? how are these priorities made? So that's a lot of questions, but it feels like it's an important one regarding to equity and some of the things that the Water Bureau has identified.
It really is an important area, and thank you so much for the question. I would love to talk more with you about this because it certainly extends through our water quality functions, but also through the entire Bureau. And it's something, equity as well as affordability are two priorities that the Commissioner and I share and are bringing to every aspect of the Bureau. I think maybe the short answer in terms of how we make decisions with equity in mind is that we are a Bureau that uses asset management, a robust asset management plan process. We're one of the leaders in the country, and I'm very proud of that because while we're obviously looking at the risk of a failure of a pipe or of a project, we also look at the equity impacts of that. So it's something that can be difficult to measure. What are the equity implications of something and what are the risks if we are inequitable? But it's really important, and I'm excited to be on the cutting edge of how we implicate equity in all of the work we do. I would love to get into a lot more detail. I know that we are running out of time, but it is another reason, just to go back to some of the other questions that were asked, the equity and protecting our most vulnerable in the community is another reason why we weren't willing to wait until filtration came online. So I think it is money very well spent to bring improved corrosion control online this April. I'm very proud of the project and of the team that is bringing it to you. And I think that is something we know when there are issues that there are people who are disproportionately impacted by our decisions. And I think it's really important that we consider those impacts and those effects of people who are least able to respond as we're making these decisions and bringing these projects online. Much more to say, but I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Gabe. And we are 2 minutes out. There's a few more questions that if people could email those to us so we can have staff respond back to them. Commissioner?
Sure. We're getting close to 7 o'clock, and I want to let people get to their dinners, but I do see that Dee has her hand up. So Dee, welcome. And what are you thinking about tonight?
Hello, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I just would like to get my question on the recording because the chat doesn't ever answer it. And my main question, I mean, as you know, I'm very deeply involved with this issue of high lead in Portland's chronic lead levels in drinking water. So our lead levels doubled in 6 months from 10 parts per billion to 21 parts per billion. That's 15 parts per billion is the action level. And Seattle is, as usual, at 2 parts per billion. Again, Commissioner Mapps, and I really appreciate you recognizing my hand raised, but is our water safe to drink?
Oh, Dee, I can assure you our water is safe to drink. Your question is kind of technical, and I want to make sure that the experts answer that. So I'm going to kick it over to Scott, Director Zollner, whoever feels best equipped to address these concerns.
Thank you,
so
Commissioner.
much.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Dee, for the question. And I would echo the Commissioner's answer. Yes, our water is safe. I'd like for Scott to maybe correct one misstatement that I heard about lead levels. I know Scott has talked a little bit about what the action level means and what regulatory homes mean, but Scott, maybe you can just quickly respond to what the 10 or what the 15 and the 21 parts per billion mean in this context.
Yeah, Yeah, thanks, Gabe. Just to kind of reiterate that the 15 parts per billion is actually that it's an action level. It's not a health-based standard. It is a level for evaluating the effectiveness of treatment in our system. In respect to the levels this fall being higher, well, to compare to the spring is a little apples to oranges type of a comparison. As we mentioned earlier, our spring results, because of better water quality, tend to be lower. That being said, our levels this fall did go higher, higher than they've been in 20 years, I believe. And so we also were concerned by that sudden increase and wanted to know, is this something going on in our system that we need to address right away? So we looked at a wide swath of data that we have access to. We collect pH throughout the system on a nearly daily basis. We have all the customer sampling that we do. We have a pool of these homes, volunteer homes that are testing monthly for us for lead and water, as well as looking at the homes that tested this fall compared to other rounds of fall. And we really did not see any significant increases in lead in any of these other places. We didn't see really any big deficiencies in water quality. pH wasn't significantly lower this round. Really, the big difference was the homes that actually sampled this fall from previous rounds, that it's just a statistical bump, and that our regulatory levels, as I said earlier, they tend to hover around the action level. Sometimes they're above and sometimes they're below. That's kind of what we expected and knew would happen when we put this treatment in back in 1998. And that is why we're putting an additional treatment out, because we need to get the level lower.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. And I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. We are past 7. Commissioner, if you want to close us out, and then we can end the meeting for there. And if we did not get to your questions, Jackson put our office email in the chat, and please feel free to reach out to us there and we can get your questions answered. All right, Commissioner.
Well, I want to thank everyone who came out tonight for this discussion. It was educational, and I think important dialogues like this are quite important. One of the questions in the chat was, are we going to do events like this again in the future? And I'm committed to doing that. I don't think it has to be specifically focused on lead. We've got lots of exciting projects I'd like to talk to you about. So I hope that we can get events like this on the calendar once every 6 months or so, and I'm committed to doing that with my other bureaus too. In addition to thanking all the residents of Portland who came out tonight, I also want to pause and thank all the employees at the Water Bureau who are here tonight too. Number one, it's the end of a long work day. Number two, something which I can see, but maybe not your average Portlander can see, is the Water Bureau has just been working incredibly hard and incredibly competently for a long, long time. I'm so proud of the work they do. I'll tell you, I believe the Water Bureau is one of the best bureaus in the entire city. It is a great privilege to partner with these folks and bring you clean, safe drinking water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So thank you, Director. Thank you, Scott. Everyone else on the call, you folks are amazing. I also want to encourage everybody to reach out to us. If we didn't get a chance to get to your questions, send my office an email and we will respond to you. I promise, Jackson right there. We'll handle your emails. I want to encourage everyone to stay safe and have a happy new year. Thank you so much and have a good night.